Hey YouTube, I'm Barrett Kendrick with Bearco Training. I do appreciate y'all watching today. Something that I see that comes up a lot, especially this time of year, we're coming up towards Christmas, is people purchasing firearms for others. A lot of times it's their significant other, a spouse, a girlfriend, something like that. Now, this video applies to all people seeking advice for a first-time handgun, but where I really see this come up the most is girls getting advice on purchasing a handgun for personal defense or home defense, something along those lines, or people buying firearms for females. That's what I'm going to put the focus on in this video. They end up getting recommended this exact firearm, a Smith & Wesson J-frame 38 special ultra light type gun. A very small, compact gun. This is a staple firearm from Smith & Wesson. It's a very reliable gun. It's a very good gun. I like the firearm itself, and this does get recommended the majority of time for a female shooter looking for advice on purchasing a handgun. Why is that? You know, unfortunately, one of the reasons is that females are just too simple-minded. They cannot handle something as complex as a semi-automatic handgun. They need something simple designed like a revolver. Does that sound like nonsense coming out of my mouth? Good, because that's exactly what it is. Obviously, if a female can sit there and drive something like a vehicle on a highway with numerous distractions and numerous other people and other cars around, then I'm pretty sure that she can also handle something like a semi-automatic handgun. So that's not something that we have to look at. This is a simple design gun. You don't have to do much. It doesn't take a lot of training to figure out how to put the ammunition in it and point it in the right direction and press the trigger. But semi-automatics also don't require some super strength and skills to be able to do that as well. So that brings up another point, and the fact that a lot of times females are recommended revolvers because they do not have a lot of hand strength to operate the slide. You know, males typically are stronger than females. We know that's a fact. But it doesn't mean that a female can't handle something like bringing the slide towards the rear on a semi-automatic handgun. The majority of the time, they just have not been taught the proper technique in doing that. Once they're taught the proper technique, they're able to bring the slide back just fine. So again, that's something we don't have to sit there and worry about in regards to guiding somebody to purchasing a firearm. Another reason I see this come up a lot with females is for some reason people give advice that something like this revolver with a long, heavy trigger press is going to be safer because there's kids in the home. Guess what? Not really. If your child is putting his hands on this gun, that's the problem. If you can't trust your child or you can't trust somebody with this firearm loaded in their hand or any gun loaded in their hand, then you don't want to put the faith in the fact that this has a long, heavy trigger press. That is not unauthorized person access prevention. Your gun's not any safer. Unfortunately, you could go to your favorite search engine right now and throw in the search terms, child shoots himself with revolver, and there's going to be numerous examples where somebody as young as possibly 2 or 3 years old, even though they don't have the hand strength to do something like put their finger on the trigger and press the trigger like a normal adult would, they could do something like put their thumbs on the trigger with the gun pointed towards their face and use their thumbs. Remember, kids, they have not been trained on those. To them, a trigger is nothing more than a lever that moves. You know, that my son, I've got a 3-year-old son, and if it is a lever or a button, he's going to figure out how to work it. So that's not child access prevention by having that long, heavy trigger. You need to make sure that if that person can't be trusted with the gun, if they haven't had the training, then you need to do something to put a barrier in place between the firearm and themselves. That's a completely different video. We'll probably get into that later as well. What I want to kind of talk about are the big pitfalls. You know, why is it that this would be a bad firearm to recommend to a beginner shooter? And there's a few things that I want to talk about. First, I want to talk about the fact that this does have a long, heavy trigger press. Ultimately, a lot of these coming from the factory have about a 12-pound trigger press that's also a long trigger travel. You know, that ends up being, and you're probably wondering why the soda cans are here. 12 pounds is about 14 or maybe 15 soda cans. So I kind of want you to keep a baggie or something, get your favorite type of soda cans, beer cans, whatever else, and put 14 or 15 of those into a bag. Take that and hang that off of your finger. And I just wanted you to kind of lift your finger a little bit. That's 12 pounds. Does that look like a lot of weight? That is. That's because it is a lot of weight. We're talking about a gun that weighs about 1 pound loaded, maybe a little less than 1 pound loaded, maybe a little over 1 pound loaded. We're talking about a gun that's about a pound. So I'm trying to do something like bring my finger back with a heavy 12 pounds and a good bit of travel distance while also trying to keep this gun steady on target. It's very difficult to do that. It's going to fatigue your fingers a whole lot faster in doing that. It's a lot harder whether you're a female, male, beginner, or advanced shooter. It's a lot harder. You have to put a lot more control in place to be able to get the same solid hits that you were trying to get on your target or on your bad guy or whatever that might be with that very heavy trigger. So that ends up being a much more less efficient type design and getting good rounds on the thread or getting good rounds on the target. So I have a tendency, we want something that has a more of a mid-range type trigger, more in the 6 pound range that's still heavy enough that it doesn't go off when we touch it. We have to apply deliberate pressure to it, but it's also going to be light enough that we're still able to get good hits on the target. Revolvers also hold a less amount of rounds in them. They're limited on the ammunition that we can actually have in the gun without having to reload. Generally speaking, something of this size is going to hold 5 rounds. Are 5 rounds enough to stop the threat in your next fight? I have absolutely no clue. But what I do know, the chances of you having to run out of ammunition or reload in the middle of that significantly go up if you don't have enough rounds in the gun if you were dealing with multiple threats or your bad guy wasn't stopping as you're putting rounds downrange. If you did have to reload, something like the revolver ends up being a little bit less efficient than a semi-automatic handgun. It takes more time, more practice to be able to get good with this than it would a semi-automatic handgun. So that's one more point that we certainly want to look at. Revolvers also have more perceived recoil or more felt recoil. You know, when a gun goes off, you've got a little mini explosion that's taking place. You've got energy that's moving forward with the bullet going down range, but you also have that equal force, that equal energy that's coming towards the rear. The moving parts on a semi-automatic handgun have a tendency to mask a lot of that recoil, making it feel like it's recoiling less in our hand, as opposed to a revolver that's 100% fixed when it's actually firing. All that recoil, that energy has to go somewhere, and our hands end up taking the blunt force of it. So because we're feeling more of that recoil, our pace of fire also slows down on those multiple shot strings. If all of a sudden you're having to fire more than one round to be able to stop that threat, then that pace at which you fire those rounds ends up getting slower because the gun's bouncing around a whole lot more. So you're potentially facing a threat for a longer period of time, meaning your life is in danger for a longer period of time. Additionally, because you're feeling the recoil a whole lot more on the revolver, especially these very small, lightweight revolvers where we can't get much hand purchase on, it ends up becoming a whole lot more uncomfortable to shoot, meaning it's painful to shoot. It's kind of like taking a bat against a metal pole. There's a shock factor that takes place that you feel in your hand. If it's painful and uncomfortable to shoot, how often do you think the new shooter wants to practice with that gun or wants to go out and take a training course with that gun? What you'll find is very little to none. It's not really high up on their to-do list. Unfortunately, I have so many students that have been handed a J-frame size lightweight revolver, or they unfortunately maybe went to a gun store and went off the advice that a relative, a spouse, or even the gun store gave them. They end up showing up to a course with the gun, with the ammo, and end up regretting that purchase significantly. So many times that this is all donated ammunition. This is people that said, I'm never going to shoot that gun again. You might as well keep the ammo. And they've gone back, maybe sold the firearm, take a hit on it, go out and purchase another gun that works well for them. So my advice to those looking to purchase a gun is go out, get the proper instruction on choosing the firearm that fits your hand well, that's going to work well for you. Hopefully you get a chance to shoot those guns. Make that decision on your own. My advice to those who are trying to make the purchase for someone else or trying to give the advice to someone else is stop it. Completely, literally just stop it. You know, you would not want your girlfriend going out and picking your power saw or your table saw or the next sports car that you want to buy. So why on earth do you think that you can pick the firearm that's going to work best for her? Revolvers are not bad firearms. I'm not sitting here trying to completely steer you away from it. They're just not for new shooters. That's an advanced shooter's gun. If you go out, you learn the skills and understand the shooting portion of it, get some reps down range, take some training, and still decide you want the revolver, then fantastic, go with it. It's just that I want you to understand that this is not the gun to learn on. This is the advanced shooter's firearm. Again, I'm Barrett Kendrick with Bearco Training. I do appreciate y'all watching today. Get out there and train realistically. I do hope to see you on the range sometime. Thank y'all.